Want us to stand here?
Yeah, if you just, we all just stand up here, so. No, okay, is everybody ready? Yeah. Okay. Good afternoon. I want to thank everybody for being here today. I want to thank all the human rights advocates we have here today. Folks from Hong Kong Watch, the Hong Kong Social Action Movement, the Hong Kong Professional Network, DC4HK, the Campaign for Uyghurs, and the Uyghur Human Rights Project do so much to call attention to the horrific human rights abuses we'll talk about today, and thank them all for their hard work. I've been up here in the Senate now for 3 years, and I've learned that in this building, too many people have a hard time stating simple facts and forcing accountability. It is a fact that the Communist Chinese Party is committing horrific human rights abuses against Tibetans, Hong Kongers, and Uyghur Muslims. It is a fact that at the direction of General Secretary Xi, the Communist Chinese Party is committing genocide and desecrating the Uyghur homeland. It is a fact that Beijing continues to systematically destroy democracy in Hong Kong. I saw it with my own eyes when I visited there in 2019. Next week, the 2022 Olympics will begin in Beijing, and the world will watch as Communist China, it's Communist China, let's never forget that, whitewashes these crimes and churns its propaganda machine to make the world forget just how evil this empire is. I can't tell you how worried I am about the athletes competing in Beijing. Look at what Communist China did to silence and disappear Peng Shuai. It's terrifying. I've called on the IOC and the Biden administration to take every step necessary to keep Americans safe. But unfortunately, I haven't heard a word from them on what they're doing about it. We cannot let anyone forget about what is happening in Communist China. NBC must use the Olympics to highlight these atrocities. Sadly, I doubt they will. That's why we're here today, to make sure no one forgets. For years, I've been calling for the Olympics not for a boycott, but be moved out of Communist China. For years, I've been highlighting Communist China's brutal abuses and demanding accountability for Communist China's genocide and attacks on democracy. For years, I've been demanding businesses to stop doing business with Communist China. Look, all we know, when you do business with Communist China, it enriches the Chinese ruling class, the Communist Chinese ruling class, and funds its oppression. We must be clear in the United States, in America, that Communist China's abuses will not be tolerated. We must call out these crimes, and we must stand by the brave advocates. I mean, you have to be a brave advocate to stand up to Communist China. And you look at what they do to their families for freedom and democracy in China, Hong Kong, Tibet, and all around the world. We must show that the United States is an unyielding and unapologetic advocate for human rights and unafraid of speaking the truth and upsetting General Secretary Xi and his Communist Party thugs. That's why we're here today, to call out these abuses and give a voice to those who Communist China is working to oppress. The people with me here today have lived it. I want you to hear straight from each of them. With that, first I'd like to introduce Joey Su, Policy Advisor for Hong Kong Watch.
Thank you, Senator. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Joey Su from Hong Kong Watch. It's my pleasure to be here, and thank you, Senator, for organizing this very important press conference. Since Hong Kong's massive pro-democracy movement broke out in 2019, more than 10,000 protesters have been arrested at the age of youngest 13. They have been arrested, abused, charged, and convicted. And over 750 of them have been found guilty of rioting, facing up to 10 years in prison simply for taking part in the very peaceful pro-democracy movement in Hong Kong. Since the enactment of the national security legislation on June 30th, 2020, over 150 individuals have been charged under ridiculous crimes like subversion, colluding with foreign forces. And from activists and politicians to legal professionals and educators, every dissenter in the city is now at the risk of facing unreasonable and lengthy imprisonment simply for being the voice of the now silenced people of Hong Kong. Up until today, more than 70 civil society organizations, including political associations, student unions, and protest groups, have been forcibly shut down. And many of them have also seen their core members arrested and persecuted. At least 11 media outlets, including Apple Daily, Stand News, and Citizens News, have ceased operations. Hong Kong's media tycoon Jimmy Lai has been held behind bars for almost 400 days up until today. And all the other journalists and reporters were detained simply for documenting the Chinese Communist Party's atrocities and human rights abuses in Hong Kong. Hong Kongers have lost not only our freedom of speech, assembly, and free press. Those who remain in the city today also are under the fear of being persecuted every single day, just for voicing opposition to the government. China has violated every promise made under the Sino-British Joint Declaration of 1984 to uphold Hong Kong's basic freedoms, rule of law, and autonomy. And unfortunately, that is not the only international commitment that the Chinese Communist Party has violated. While crackdowns in Hong Kong escalate, more than 1 million Uyghur and Turkic Muslims continue to be held in concentration camps. They are undergoing forced sterilization, systematic sexual abuse, forced labor, and political indoctrination. Countless of them, including the retired medical doctor Grishan Abbas, have been disappeared by the Chinese Communist Party for years. And just a week ago in Tibet, Tashi Wangchuk, the prominent language rights activist who was detained for 6 years simply for courageously speaking out against Beijing's discriminatory language policies, he again chose to stand up for his people and then again facing arrest. Where are all these Uyghurs? Where is the very brave tennis player Peng Shuai, who stood up for herself? Where is Zhang Zhan, the journalist who exposed Wuhan's situation since the COVID-19 pandemic first began? With all these questions unanswered, and our family and friends still behind bars, how can anyone still participate in the Olympics, hosted by a regime who has their hands full of blood of countless innocent people? The world cannot continue to sit back in silence. A strong and clear message has to be sent that the CCP and any of its supporters will not escape from its responsibilities without paying a price. We welcome a diplomatic boycott, but that is far from enough. We need the US to take the lead to hold the International Olympics Committee accountable for rewarding a genocidal regime with such an important international event, and to hold sponsors of the genocidal games who sacrifice human rights for financial gains accountable. The CCP's authoritarian behavior and repressive policies against Hong Kongers, Uyghurs, and Tibetans cannot be normalized. Any form of participation in the upcoming 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics is equivalent to endorsing its escalating atrocities. And any form of appeasement policy is no different than allowing China to continue its oppression, and even inviting it to our backyards. And as Candor Freedom once said, all the gold medals in the world aren't worth selling your morals. And I hope that we, especially our governments and policymakers, will always remember this. Nothing is worth sacrificing human rights for, whether in Hong Kong or in the US or beyond. And Senator Scott, I remember you are actually the first sitting member of Congress to visit Hong Kong amid the 2019 protests. And I'm very glad that he remained one of the strongest allies of the people of Hong Kong. And I also want to acknowledge the Hong Kong community members in Washington area who are in the audience today, especially the HADC leadership team and all the others. They have doing a lot of great work to advocate for our cause and to defend human rights from the encroachment of the Chinese Communist Party. Thank you, everyone.
So I was blessed to have the opportunity to go to Hong Kong during the protests back in, I guess, 2019. And one of the individuals I've had the opportunity to work with since before and then is Samuel Chu, president and founder of the Campaign for Hong Kong.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you, Joey, for the words that you have shared. And I want to take the cue from Senator Scott, who said, I think, something very true about Capitol Hill, which is that sometimes the simplest truth has to be stated up front and clearly. So let me start by saying that we really shouldn't have to be here today, because these games of the 2022 Winter Olympics should have never been awarded to China in the first place. And there were ample opportunity for the IOC and for many bodies to make sure that we did not have to come to this. China has consistently showed in 2001 to secure the rights for the 2008 Olympic Games. The Chinese government made all the promises to improve human rights, press freedoms, treatments of dissidents, internet censorships. They not only broke those promises, they have doubled down on the repression and exported it beyond its border. And by failing to hold China accountable for those abuses in the lead up and during the 2008 Games, the IOC effectively told the CCP that it could do whatever it wants without fear of repercussions and sanctions. As I've said, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And fool me 3 times, then I think there's a scam and a con that everybody is in on. Like this weekend, the noted veteran sportcaster Bob Costa, who covers 12 different Olympic Games, said, the IOC deserves all of the disdain and disgust that are coming its way for returning the game to China. They are shameless. In 2019, Russia was banned from playing and hosting any international sporting events for doping for 4 years. It was later reduced to 2 years. But imagine, Russia, for doping, is banned from a game that is hosted by a regime committing genocide. Let that sink in. If a 4-year ban is justified for doping, what is the equivalent justification for penalties that threatens the lives and the freedoms of millions of the Uyghurs in their homeland, of the 7.5 million Hong Kongers, and even the safety of the 23.5 million Taiwanese and their sovereignty? Hosting the Olympic has become the go-to solution for the CCP and authoritarian regime to whitewash their crimes, to boost their international image, to strengthen alliance, to use it to build and strengthen their security apparatus and surveillance. I also want to echo Senator Scott's call that the burden is now on the broadcasters, NBC, Universals, and broadcasters around the world who pay billions of dollars and will reap billions of profits to put a spotlight on the plight of the Uyghurs, of Hong Kongers, and all those who suffer in the repression. I bring a final word from Angela Gui, who's a founding member for the Campaign for Hong Kong, who's the daughter of Guo Minghai, a Swedish Hong Kong bookseller who was kidnapped in Thailand and now imprisoned in China for publishing books that are critical of the CCP. She said that it's imperative as the official broadcaster, like NBC in the US, that they do not reproduce and spread any CCP propaganda, as many of the media outlets did in broadcasting my father's forced confession on television. I ask that you and your affiliates would be clear and provide coverage on the Chinese government human rights abuses in Xinjiang against the Uyghurs and the suppression of democracy in Hong Kong and the plight of all political prisoners like my father. I often hear people argue that the games are not about geopolitical issues, that the games are about something bigger. I agree. The games are about something bigger. The ideals and the values of the Olympic movement cannot be achieved or won on the field unless they become lived realities for everyone off the field. So that's my call for all of us. Let's make the Olympics about something bigger. Let's show that we're not going to be complicit in the abuse that we witness and bear witness to today. Thank you, Senator Scott, and thank you for my brothers and sisters who are here.
Next, we're going to hear from, hope I get the name right.
Al Fedor.
Al Fedor. You'll do the whole name so I don't mess it up. But with the Uyghur American Association.
Thank you, Senator Scott.
Probably give him your name better than I would.
I do understand. I have a very unique name. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to thank Senator Scott and his amazing team, and also everyone who's standing here against injustice. We are gathered here today to stand against an Olympics tainted by the Chinese Communist Party's crimes against humanity and genocide. The Chinese government seeks to sport wash its human rights record with the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympic, but not on our watch. As we have done in the years leading up to the Olympics, we will continue to ask how the world can continue to blindly embolden the Chinese government and continue to play and do business as usual when that government commits crimes against humanity and genocide against the Uyghurs and Tibetans. When that government continues to destroy the spark of the democracy in Hong Kong and threatens to do the same in Taiwan. As a member of Uyghur community, I will stand with brothers and sisters from Tibet, Hong Kong, and Taiwan, and will continue to ask these questions on February 4th, when the Games are scheduled to begin in Beijing. I will ask again on February 5th, the anniversary of the 1997 Gulja massacre, where thousands of Uyghurs men, women, and children took the streets to peacefully protest against discrimination, but were met by the brute force by the security forces. And if the Olympics go forward, I will ask every day and again on February 20th, when the Olympics are scheduled to end. And I will ask again in the days and weeks and months after about the large stain on human rights that is in the Beijing 2022 Olympics. Is that what the Olympics and the sportsmanship stands for? The goal of the Olympics is to contribute to the building a peaceful and better world with the spirit of friendship, solidarity, and fair play. There is no fairness in awarding a government responsible for ongoing crimes against humanity and genocide an opportunity to sport wash its crimes with the Olympics. Business sponsors such as Coca-Cola and Airbnb should end their complicity in the CCP's business of genocide and slave labor if they don't want to go down in the history as the sports sponsors of the genocide Olympics. We call on athletes to stand with us in the spirit of friendship, solidarity, and fair play, and use their platforms to amplify our calls for justice and accountability. Be true champions by standing on the side of the oppressed. Thank you so much.
Next, we're going to hear from Mustafa Aksku, the Human Rights Project. And by the way, everybody standing up here has a story. They have a story about their family, and they have a story about friends and what's happening to them.
Thank you, Senator Scott. I'm very grateful to you for speaking out so strongly about my people and everyone else who is suffering atrocities at the hand of the Chinese government. As I speak, millions of Uyghurs are subject to China's endless atrocity crimes. Uyghur men and women are suffering unspeakable trauma, torture, and sexual violence. Millions are detained with no trial. At least 800,000 Uyghur children have been taken away from their families by force and are being raised in government orphanages and boarding schools. It is likely that most of them will never see their families again. And the government is carrying out the campaign of forced sterilization and forced abortion. Uyghur business leaders are subjected to unfair trials and given long prison sentences like 14 or 20 years. Then their business assets are confiscated and sold on Alibaba's auction site. The Uyghur Human Rights Project and the Wall Street Journal found evidence of at least 84 million US dollar of property sold online in the last 3 years. The possession of property is a key hallmark of genocide. My own family members are suffering surveillance, harassment, threats, and detention. My classmates and teachers and neighbors have disappeared. I don't even know whether some of them are alive or dead. Our mosques are desecrated or paved over. Hundreds of cemeteries have been bulldozed. Even the dead are not left in peace. For the world to treat the 2022 Winter Olympics as business as usual is an outrage. I hope that people can see that it is not just another sporting event. Every time when you see the NBC logo and the 5 Olympic rings, you need to see what is behind the screen. Hundreds of concentration camps where my people are suffering. It is very important that the United States and many other governments have rejected business as usual and will not send any officials to the Games next month. More governments need to do the same. Fundamentally, the Olympic Charter is being violated at its very core when the Beijing government is allowed to continue as the host. The Charter has a commitment to the preservation of human dignity. This is a farce. The Chinese government's atrocities are an indelible stain on the Olympic moment. It is not too late for sponsors, governments, and broadcasters to pull out. If the world is truly serious about stopping genocide, it is the least that what they can do. Thank you.
Next, we're going to hear from Antis Cantor Freedom. Antis is the center for the Boston Celtics and has put his career at risk to stand up for human rights all over the world, but especially in Turkey and in communist China. So, Antis?
Hey, everybody. Thank you, Senator, for inviting me. I really appreciate it. You know, what I want to say is obviously, you know, the last 10 years I have been focusing on all the human rights abuses happened in Turkey. And then just this summer, I started to study about what's going on over there in China. And the things that I have seen, it really broke my heart. And I was like, as an athlete, as someone who has platform, I need to speak out about all the abuses happen over there. You know, what I want to say is obviously, you know, that the Chinese government is committing genocide and crimes against humanity and against, you know, my Uyghur brothers and sisters. You know, if you look at it, they're erasing Tibetan identity and culture and attacking freedoms in Hong Kong and threatening democratic Taiwan. And I think we cannot be silent in the face of these injustices. And, you know, the world needs to wake up and realize that the Chinese Communist Party is not our friend. And, you know, about the Olympics, obviously, I'm an athlete, and a lot of people are asking me that question about the coming up Winter Olympics. And, you know, to me, you know, Chinese government does not represent Olympic core values of excellence, of respect, of friendship. And I believe they are a brutal dictatorship, and they engage in censorship, and they threaten freedoms, and they do not respect human rights, and they hide the truth. And, you know, when I heard about the International Olympic Committee, I was very angry and sad because I think the IOC is complicit and echoes the Chinese government's propaganda. You know, there are so many human rights violations that are happening in China, and while we are talking right now, there is a genocide happening. You know, as you guys know, there's torture, forced labor, rape, and sterilization. And, you know, so far, if you look at it, you know, United States, UK, Australia, Canada, Lithuania, many other countries won't be sending their, you know, government representatives to the games. So there is a diplomatic boycott. I believe it's good, but it's not enough. I think, you know, us athletes need to stand up. And, you know, whenever I have a conversation with these, you know, athletes, I'm just keep, you know, telling them, listen, all the gold medals in the world that you can win is not more important than your values and your principles and your morals. So we need to stand up for, you know, against the Chinese Communist Party. So, what I'm hoping for, and I hope, more athletes, learn about what's going on and speak up, because it is important to stand up what's happening over there. So, and yeah, that's what I think.
Are you there?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Enes, I want to thank you, and I want to thank you for speaking up, putting your career at risk, but speaking up for other individuals' human rights.
Well, thank you so much for organizing this press conference. It is important to get the message out there so everybody can hear what's going on. So I really appreciate that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
So we'll open up for questions if we could stay on topic. These are individuals that are focused on human rights. They're focused on what's happening to their families, and every one of them has a story. I hope over the next couple weeks as the Olympics are going on, everybody will have the opportunity to get their stories out there, so we let people know exactly what Communist China is doing, but it's clearly genocide.
We've heard so much about the Uyghurs and the persecution of them, but other religions as well, such as the Catholic channel, Catholics over there, and Christians. Can you elaborate more on that, on the persecution that they're receiving as well?
So whether that is in Hong Kong or in parts in China, we have seen so many Christians and Catholics being persecuted by the Chinese Communist Party. They have their churches destroyed by the Chinese Communist Party. We have seen practitioners being arrested and persecuted by the Chinese Communist Party. And the situation right there, no matter that is in Hong Kong or in China, is worsening day by day. And that is also one of the reasons why it is so important for us to call for a boycott from different governments, world leaders, as well as athletes and individuals, because it is so important that we cannot continue to help to legitimize this authoritarian regime, and we cannot continue to be a part of Chinese Communist Party's propaganda campaign. Thank you.
We saw this, by the way, and Samuel bring this up, but we saw this when I went over to Hong Kong, what they were doing to religious freedom.
Yeah, and I think that, again, to the point, I think that this is not just anecdotal. And I think it's important for people to understand that this is not just one case here, one case there. Recently, there was a report, I think from either Associated Press or Reuters, who says that Catholic priests are actually being sent back from Hong Kong to the mainland to receive a form of essentially re-education and being told what they are allowed to say, what they're allowed to do, and that is happening in a systematic way, much like what you see in the Xinjiang regions. And so I think that what we're now seeing is that those tactics are being exploited. It's going beyond just the Xinjiang region. Hong Kong is becoming the next Xinjiang region.
Yeah. I would like to add that President Xi Jinping himself ordered and says that any religion, not just Islam, any religion is treated like a disease and needs to be completely shut down. So that's why what's going on in the past, before this recent genocide, Falun Gong was facing the same thing. So I would like to mention that not only Uyghurs with Islam, anyone that is against the, seems like a threat to the Chinese government is considered as the enemy of the Chinese government. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I studied in mainland China. I went to college there, and I can just share a little bit of my experience being with my Chinese Christian friends and also Catholics. And I remember that some of my friends used to go to house churches, and in a few weeks, it was known by the public security officers, and they cracked down heavily on them. And in China, there's no space for any religion. Not only Islam, as we said, but also Catholics, Christians, and other religious practitioners. There was no room left for them anymore.
Yeah, when I went to Hong Kong back in 2019, I met with some religious leaders, and they basically had to shut their mouths. They didn't have any rights. What else? Yes.
China doesn't seem to be deterred by really anything. I mean, no matter what the U.S. has done so far, they're moving forward with their Olympics. It's going to be a moment in the sun for them. Can you speak to how a possible Russian invasion of Ukraine might embolden that country to perhaps take action against Taiwan? Are you concerned about that? And what can Congress, if anything, do to deter that?
Well, I think what we have to do is we all have to stand up for human rights. We can't. We all love the rights we have in this country. I think everybody that lives in a democracy appreciates the rights we have. And so whatever's happened around the world, whether it's happened in Turkey or whether it's in China, whatever's happened, we stand up for it. We also have to do everything we can to help people like the Ukrainians, the Lithuanians, the citizens of Poland, and clearly the citizens of Taiwan deal with these brutal dictators, with what Putin's doing and what Xi's doing. And I think one of the things that really helps is if you can stand up for what you believe in, stand up for human rights. It's very difficult for anybody to complain when you're standing up for somebody else's human rights.
Yes. Talking a little bit about the U.S. Innovation and Competition Act. The House is expected to pass it very soon. Do you think that goes strong enough against, are you going to vote for it, and do you think it goes strong enough against human atrocities such as this? No, I'm not voting for it. I think we're competing, so we have to compete. But what you want to do it in a manner that if you're going to spend American taxpayer dollars, you're going to get a return for it.
Senator, following up on Hunter's question a little bit, are you concerned at all that the administration is maybe looking the other way in terms of China and Taiwan because of their focus east on Ukraine and Russia right now?
I don't know why they're doing it, but the administration for the last year. I've called on them to. I called them to do something about the Olympics, since Biden's been in office. They won't meet with me. They don't do anything about it. I haven't seen a place in the world where the Biden administration stood up for human rights. I couldn't get it done we have 1,300 people, peaceful protesters in prison right now in Cuba. Can't get them to stand up for it. But I think it's just they're appeasers. They don't want to stand up against human rights anywhere. And so, Biden should have been very vocal the minute he came in to say the Olympics should have been moved. They could have been moved. He's not done anything about it. The diplomatic boycott is something, but it's not much.
Where else could they have gone? The only other country that was still bidding was Kazakhstan, and they're not exactly a calm.
There's plenty.
Right now.
If you look at all the events that are happening, there's places you could have held those events around the world. They could have done it, but they put no effort into it. Olympic sponsors. There was an article today in the Wall Street Journal that they're not talking about their Olympic affiliation, but it said in this article that Coke was still advertising in communist China. Come on, we all believe in these rights that we have here. Let's stand up for them. And I think part of the Olympic principle is that it's equal opportunity. Everybody we're in this together. And when you listen to if you listen to stories of what's happening to the Uyghurs, if you listen to the story of the involuntarily taking people's organs, or you listen to the story of journalists in Hong Kong, they're in prison now will be the rest of their life. They won't make it out. It's just, we had a bookseller when I was over there that was arrested just because he sold books that were not complimentary of Xi. And they're holding the Olympics. My goal of this is we have got to start standing up for human rights, but this is an opportunity that when the Olympics is going to be front and center, then all of these individual stories, their stories ought to be front and center, just like the Olympics is front and center.
How important is it in this moment that we're in, watching Russia, to keep our eyes on China too?
I think you have to fight every day. I think you have to. But to the extent that we're going to follow in what China's doing with the Olympics, then we ought to be telling the stories, what's happened to the Uyghurs, what's happened to Tibetans, how they just took away, the basic rights of the Hong Kong citizens without firing a shot. And the world didn't do anything about it. And then we're letting them hold the Olympics. This is disgusting. It's disgusting what Putin's doing right now, and it's disgusting what she's been doing for a long time.
Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, thanks, everybody.
I can send them to you too.
Yeah, that'll be great.
Yeah, I can email them to you.
Yeah, that'll be great. Thank you.